Okay, I want to start off by giving all praises to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Rakah Kodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, who teacheth the Bible in 100% truth. And Shalom to the hopeful elect of the 12 tribes of Israel, starting with the 144,000, consisting of the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans in the land of the Americas, as well as the speckled bird, the Israelite foreigners living amongst the other nations. Shalom to you. Okay, today I'm looking again at the democratic system. In the previous two videos I spoke of Revelation chapter 13 and went into the beast system and the democratic system, the two horns like a lamb which spake as a dragon. And in the last 7 days, we've seen the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, and we're seeing a lot of movement within the democratic system within America, and we're also seeing a lot of movement within the democratic system around the world in general in 2024, the hopeful year of Jacob's trouble. Now so I spoke of the beast system. Before I move on into the lesson, talking of the assassination, there's lots of things coming out about the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. There's this one particular video here. I'm going to leave the link for this in the description box. This is FBI connected directly to Donald Trump assassination attempt in a new report. And we speculate. We don't know what information is true, what is not. But this particular person does go into mentioning the banking elites, people like the Rothschild. He mentions Soros. I think his name's George. Is it George Soros? And he mentioned, what type of dealings that they were going into, and those dealings would have made a lot of money had Trump been assassinated, for example. But obviously that came close to happening but didn't happen. And so, certain transactions did not make the money they were expected to make. And then, when people trade, and the trade goes wrong, you can't call the trade back. But there's certain people, who have that level of power where they can do that. So, I did leave the link for this. I highlighted this particular video a few days ago on the community page. So you might have seen this flash up already. You might have seen it, but if you haven't, it's very interesting. Have a look. And he goes into the latest shenanigans, the dealings, the behind the scenes, the things that are going on, based around the assassination attempt. So if you haven't seen that, take a look. It's very interesting. But I just wanted to get that out of the way. But yeah, today I'm going into that democratic system again. Here you can see on the screen an illustration put together by the men of GMS, which shows a depiction of the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns, spoken of in Revelation chapter 13. That's what I went into in the previous two videos, and this time we're looking at Revelation chapter 17. Because I've got an article which shows certain developments that can be taking place, so we're going to look into that in a minute. The news has just come out just now. You can see here, says Biden says he will stand down and not run for re-election. This was 12 minutes ago. This is today. There's no point really reading into that. Now they've obviously, a week ago you had the assassination attempt. Now you've got Biden, deciding to stand down. All roads lead to a likely victory for Donald Trump. And that's quite important when we look at the next article. But before that, we're going to go to Revelation chapter 17. And so, like I say, I went into that on the previous video, talking about the beast system, what it represents, and the fact that it is based around the democratic system. 2 horns like a lamb, which spake as a dragon. And so, I explained, you're watching these 2 horns as a lamb. People are deciding who to vote for, and they're trying to decide which one is good and which one is bad, and what's the best choice, and they expect that to then develop into, things in this world improving. That's how people are seeing the future. They're looking at it, they're going, well, we've got these candidates, can we pick and choose the right one to improve society? But ultimately you keep picking of these two horns of a lamb, but they ultimately speak like as a dragon, and they will get more draconian in the time of Jacob's trouble. And ultimately this all connects back to the same beast system. The beast system is the modern day Roman Empire, which consists of EU and NATO. And America is that great whore spoken of here in Revelation chapter 17, which rides that beast system, if you like, manipulates the beast system in order to fulfill the will of that great whore. And this is Revelation chapter 17. Now I'm not going to go into a full breakdown into this particular chapter. I believe I have done that on there is a video on the channel where you can get a full breakdown. I don't know what the video will be called, but if you find a video with the thumbnail is a picture of a woman holding a golden cup, then that will be the video in which I go into Revelation chapter 17. But this is Revelation 17:1. It says, and there came out of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, with the Apostle John on the Isle of Patmos, saying unto me, come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. And so this Revelation chapter 17 is now going to talk about this whore. And like I explained in the previous video, that whore is America, the one that rides the beast spoken of in Revelation chapter 13. Now you jump down to verse 5, for example. It says, and upon her forehead was a name written upon this this whore. It says, mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And so this is America. When you jump back to verse 2, for example, it says, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication. So they've committed spiritual adultery against the Most High by following the philosophies and the customs of that whore, America. And it says, and the inhabitants of earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So these philosophies, this alphabet crew, even democracy, people in this society that we live in, especially in the Western society, they see a democracy as the way forward. If you look in the UK, for example, there's a big question amongst the general public, why do we have a king and a queen? A king and a queen rule, but that king at the minute, we have King Charles. Ultimately he has a parliament, he has a prime minister to run the affairs of the country for him, and so that's based around the democratic system. Yet you have people within the country that say, well then why do we have a king? Why do we pay taxes to the king? If we have a democratic system, we should just be moving off of that. So that's just 2 examples. You've got the alphabet and philosophy and so on and so forth. So the earth has followed the ways of America. America has manipulated them through the beast system, and the beast system ultimately goes back to the EU and the NATO. So moving down to because the point I want is towards the bottom, but I'm moving on to verse 8. This is just in case you're new. Like I said, I'm not going into word for word on this particular chapter at the minute, but I want to pull out the points that are relevant to the article. Revelation 17:8, it says, the beast that thou sawest, again speaking to John, the beast that thou sawest was and is not. Okay, so this beast was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. So when we were looking at Revelation 13 in the previous video, you have the ancient Roman Empire, you have today's revised Roman Empire. And within this revised Roman Empire, America are like the kings of the earth, if you like, with by manipulating that beast system, the EU and NATO, and having control over the system. But it says here, the beast that thou sawest was and is not. So how can it be was and it is not? Because it has two parts, and one part was, and at the time that this revelation was given to John, the second part is not. It still had to come, and which is the part we're in now. And it shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, which represents Europe, and go into perdition, which means destruction. To sum it up simply, you've got the ancient Roman Empire, and then you've got the revised Roman Empire. However, the revised Roman Empire goes through a process of building. You have the Renaissance period, you had the British Empire, and then you have the birth of America. Then you have the formation of NATO and the EU, and then there you have the completion of the modern day beast system. So it's talking of and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, out of Europe, and then go into perdition, which is destruction. With America being produced, and then EU and then the NATO, you now have the completion of the modern day beast system, which is back. But then America is going to be ultimately the bullseye target. And once that gets destroyed, that destroys the modern day beast system during the time of World War III. It says, and they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world. Those who are not of the elect of Yahweh, Bahashim Yahushai, these shall wonder. It says, and when they behold the beast that was and is not and yet is. So it sounds like a riddle, but at the time, when this revelation was given to John, it says the beast that was the ancient Roman Empire and is not and yet is yet to come. Starting off from the time of Renaissance period, Renaissance art, Renaissance language, Christopher Columbus, whose true name is Christopher Cologne, roughly around that period. And it says here, and here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. So, going back to this artwork, this is an illustration of the beast system I spoke of in the previous, like I say, in the previous 2 videos. It says at the top, the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns is NATO. The 7 heads equals 7 governments or kingdoms ruled by Esau. And if you're new, you can take a screenshot of this, for example. I understand it, but obviously having an illustration like this is helpful, because it's sometimes difficult to remember all the names, and this helps you put it, to summarize it and put it into one. So, just going back to Revelation 17, and this is, here is the mind of which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. So 7 mountains, we're going to go look now. And so you can see here you have 7 heads. Germania Major, the Romans, the French, the Spanish, Germania Minor, the British, and the Greeks. So it says here the 7 heads, just under the title, the 7 heads equals 7 governments or kingdoms ruled by Edomites, ruled by Esau. So we're moving on to verse 10, and it says, and there were 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. So again, you've now got to look at the time at which this revelation was given to John, roughly 2,000 years ago. 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And that represents the British. You look at the British head there, after the time of the when this revelation was given to John. Moving on after the time of Renaissance art, Renaissance language, roughly 500 years ago, the time of Christopher Columbus. You then had the British Empire, which pretty much ruled the world. At one point you had the British Empire map of the world, and what they did is they covered every part of the world which was ruled by British Empire in red. And you look at that, and pretty much most of the world was covered in red at that time. So the one is, don't forget, as John is being spoken to at that time, the one was the Romans. And then you can see out of the 7, the only one that hadn't come or been and gone at that time, the one that was to come was the British. So going back to Revelation 17, it says 5 have fallen, one is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. Now that short space is because England is the mother of America. And you go to the book of Jeremiah, it tells you about, come World War III, speaking to America, Babylon the Great, it says that your mother shall be sore confounded, and that is speaking of England, the British. It says 5 have fallen, one is, and the other is not yet come. When he cometh, he must continue a short space. Again, this has happened after the time of obviously when John the Revelator was alive. Verse 11, it says, and the beast that was, so back to this ancient Roman Empire that was and is not, because the second part still had to come, even he is the 8th and is of the 7 and goeth into perdition. So now this represents America. You see, when you go back to the illustration, there are 7 heads. Now the 8th is not an 8th head. It says the 8th is of the 7th. It came out of the 7th. So you have 7 heads, and then the 7th then had another head. Doesn't now make it an 8-headed beast. The 8th came out of the 7th. The 7th being the British, the mother to America. And from there we can jump to Daniel chapter 7. This is verses 7 and 8. Daniel 7 and 7. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. So this represents the Roman Empire, which ultimately comes in 2 parts. And the part I want, verse 8, I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn. Now this little horn is America. The birth of America out of, if you like, you have the mother, which is Britain. But obviously it goes on here to say, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots, the Spanish, the French, and then ultimately the British. You had the War of Independence. It says, and behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. So this represents America. Going back to this beast, the 8th head is of the 7th. Britain is the mother of America, and it's also that little horn, with eyes like eyes of the man speaking great things. And that's your 8th head. So even he is the 8th and is not the next one in line after the 7th, it's of 7. So there's still original 7, the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns, and goeth into perdition. So that's ultimately the end, the end result for America. Perdition means destruction. It says, and the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. So we go back to the illustration. Now these 7 heads have 10 horns. They represent kings. Now you can go, into the ancient empires, look them up. But, moving forward from here, or as of current day, these 10 kings, these 10 horns, 7 heads and 10 horns represent 10 kings. 10 kings are 10 nations of the EU. Now, the EU used to be called the EEC, the European Economic Community. Like I say, I'm just using this illustration just to remind me, but if you're new, you take a screenshot, you can go over it a few times before it'll start to sink in. And you have on the right hand side a list of 10 nations. Got Belgium, 10 horns if you like: Belgium, Denmark, France, Italy, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Greece. Spain and Portugal count as 1. England and Ireland count as 1. And then you have West Germany. So these are your original 10 members of the EU, and these are the 10 horns. And we go back to, nowadays when you look at the EU, it's obviously grown to many nations. It's changed from the EEC to the EU. It's grown many nations, and at this point, the UK has actually even left the EU, which goes into prophecy spoken of by Daniel. I believe it's chapter 2. And just looking down below, we've got NATO is an acronym for North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So this pretty much makes up the beast. Like I say, if you want a full breakdown, you have to look into the channel, you'll find one. But it says here, and the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings. So currently today, these 10 horns are the 10 kings, represent the EU in its original form. Obviously today they have grown. It says, which have received no kingdom as yet. Because those kingdoms that we read on there's no particular kingdom of those nations. It says, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beasts. So at the minute, those nations can't rule. Denmark, I think, was on the list. Denmark's not a nation that's going to rule in the world. However, the 1 hour the Most High has given the 10 horns, one of them being Denmark, for example, is given 1 hour with the beast. So that's why it's then within the EU. The EU works with NATO, and this makes up the beast. The beast is then manipulated by America. A major factor within this whole construct is the democratic system. These have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. So, for example, you mess with a member of NATO, you mess with one, you mess with them all. That their power is with them. You may think Denmark or Luxembourg, small country, we go over there, we're going to invade, take over. But then, they're going to call their friends, they're going to call the beast system, and that's their power. And so you'll give their power and strength unto the beast. And so what they do, they follow the philosophies and customs pushed at them through the beast system. Those customs and traditions are designed by America, and they use the beast system to feed them around the world. These nations take it on board. Sometimes they do it for money, sometimes they do it for this, that and the other. And ultimately, one thing all these nations do abide by, most of them is, especially the ones in the EU, for example, and in NATO, they abide by a democratic system. These have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. So everything that the beast wants, they bow down to it. They say, we will rule our people in the way that you advise us to. But when we're in trouble, we're going to call on you, and that's the connection. So victory for the Lamb. Don't forget, I've got an article to go into, but kind of need to set the scenario, set the scene. It says victory for the Lamb, verse 14. these shall make war with the Lamb. Who? Going back to 10 horns which thou sawest, 10 kings which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. It says that these shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them. So, when it gets to World War III, keep warning, there's only a few major prophecies left. You've got the implementation of the MOTB, the digitization of the worldwide monetary system, and people being told to take a device under the skin. And then you have the prophecy of World War III. So come World War III, there will be an appearance of Yahweh B'Hashem Yahushai, obviously Yahushai in the chariots. The angels accompany him, and there will be war in heaven. But at that point, they will be overcome. So, but reading on here, it says, for he, how Yahushai is Lord of lords and King of kings, and they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. And he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. America is that great melting pot. And not only is it sitting on the people of America, the great melting pot, all the nations have travelled over there to make a life for themselves, but it's also riding the beast system. That ultimately the beast system is oppressing, it's riding the nations of the world, the people. So we all feel it. And he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. And wherever you go in the world, people are affected by this whore, implementing sanctions and so on and so forth through the beast system. It says, and the 10 horns, back to the EU, the original 10 nations, if you like 14, 12, sorry, you had Spain and Portugal, so there were 2 nations rolled into one. You had England and Ireland, 2 nations working together as one. So technically the 10 were 12, but it was 10 members. They've now grown to many. It says here, in the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, America, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. And this represents, as you can probably tell, nuclear ICBM destruction. It says, the 10 horns which thou sawest on the beast, these shall hate the whore. People say that hate is a strong word. Well, it's going to be so bad that they shall make her desolate and naked. How do you make a country desolate? You do it with the ICBMs. Desolation means, total annihilation of the whore and everything upon it. We know the whore represents America. And it says, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. Again, these are results of what what happened when you are struck by nuclear ICBMs. It says, for the Most High have put it in their hearts to fulfill his will. So these Christians, to keep telling you the Most High is all about love. Yet the Most High wants to make America totally desolate. And he's going to put it in the minds of the EU to help. We know the main charge is going to be led by Russia. Through the scriptures, we know that the land of Israel will be destroyed and rebuilt back up. We know many nations around the world, anyone that possesses a nuclear ICBM will ultimately throw them over to America to destroy it. But ultimately, it says here, for the Most High hath put it in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree, and to give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of the Most High shall be fulfilled. And the woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. So the point we're looking at here is this, what we've read off in verse 16, Revelation 17:16, and the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast shall hate the whore, shall make her desolate and naked. Now we're moving towards World War III. Like we've brought that out many a time. And now we've got this particular article here. This is a Telegraph. This is dated the 17th of July. We're looking at 4 days ago. And it says, it is time for Europe to panic. Now, when you're reading fast, it's easy to mix the words up. And, you could confuse that for the question. Is it time for Europe to panic? No, this is not a question. This is a statement. It is. It is time for Europe to panic. We're heading fast to World War III. And, I myself, I mentioned in the beginning of January 2023, within 3 years, you're going to see this World War III and this destruction. And then last October we had the activation of the lease of the flock, drawing out other nations into World War III. But this will ultimately be a drawn out event. And now that war's still going on, and there's other things happening around the world which indicate that prophecy is moving very fast. We had the start of the Hebrew year in March to April, and then we had the solar eclipse. And the solar eclipse is a clear indication that there's something special. The Most High is showing us a sign about the year coming up. We don't know if it's the actual year of recompense, the Hebrew year, from roughly March to March next year. We don't know if that's the actual year of recompense. But I have mentioned that things are going to start to escalate very rapidly. And now we're moving towards this presidential election in America. We've seen the assassination attempt. We've seen lots of things coming out, lots of movement. We're now seeing Biden resigning, and things are starting to move very quickly in the direction we want them to be. So we're seeing World War III cooking up, and we're seeing the MOTB. Things are coming out slowly, and we're just waiting for that right point. So now this is another article that leads us in that direction. It says, under a Trump-Vance administration, there is very real chance that the continent will be standing alone against the Russian threat. This is talking to Europe. Don't forget, when we go back to Revelation 17, the 10 horns, these shall hate the whore. Who is the whore? The whore is America. The America is about to have a new leader, and the new leader, more than likely is going to be Donald Trump, unless they try another assassination attempt and they're successful, or something else. It looks likely that this person will be president of the whore, which is riding the beast system. Now he's chosen, this person, Vance, as his what do they call it? The vice. And it says it, under a Trump-Vance administration, there is a very real chance that the continent will be standing alone, the continent of Europe, will be standing alone against the Russian threats. If they weren't already ringing, the decision by Donald Trump to pick Ohio Senator J.D. Vance as his running mate should sound serious alarm bells in Europe regarding America's future defensive role on the continent. It is the clearest indication yet that he is adopting an American first, Europe last policy, which will have major ramifications for the conflict in Ukraine and for future of Western security. So, we read in Ezekiel chapter 38, for example, about, Russia, having hooks in their jaws. And, we told you that they're going to try to regain the status that they had during the Soviet Union. And for the last 2 years, you've seen war, consistent war going on, between Russia and Ukraine. Now, that's a fulfillment of prophecy. Ezekiel 38, you can see it playing out. Okay, that's great, but it doesn't just stop there. This is Yahweh B'Hashem Yahushai, the ultimate chess player. So what's happening over there is having knock-on effects, and we're going to see what type of knock-on effect is happening, as explained here. says Trump's new running mate is no hawk. As Russia prepared to invade Ukraine in February 2022, the maverick Ohio senator said, "I got to be honest with you, I don't really care what happens to Ukraine one way or another." Since then, aside from urging Ukraine to fold its resistance and negotiate with Russia, Vance has railed against what he sees as Europe and NATO's entitled reliance on the US's security umbrella. So, what's his first name? Vance is basically, I can't remember his first name, JD, I don't know what JD stands for, but JD Vance, basically, he's already said at the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine war, I don't really care what's going on with them, it's got nothing to do with me. And he's against Europe relying on NATO, their reliance on NATO for security and using the US as a security umbrella. Under a Trump-Vance administration, in short, there is a very real chance that Europe risks standing alone against the Russian threat. If there was any time to panic, it is now. And that's pretty much the premises of the article. It says, after all, for many months now, countries on Europe's eastern flank, like Poland and Estonia, have warned about the prospect of a more direct war with Russia within 2 to 3 years, depending on what happens in Ukraine. Their point, too often ignored, is that Russia's key objective long term is to erode and eventually destroy the idea that Article number 5 is watertight, making the alliance a strategic irrelevance. So what they're saying on the Eastern Europe side, Estonia, Poland, they're basically saying, look, Putin's a problem. He's in it for the long haul. He's in it to erode. When you erode something, it takes time. You don't just come in and get rid of it. You erode it over time. And they're basically saying that his idea is to destroy the idea of Article 5 of NATO, which, they want it to seem watertight, but Putin's showing you that Article 5 of NATO is not watertight. Now, what is Article 5? What is NATO Article 5? It says, with the invocation of Article 5, allies can provide any form of assistance they deem necessary to respond to a situation. This is an individual obligation on each ally, and each ally is responsible for determining what it is deemed necessary in the particular circumstances. So if you're part of NATO, and one of the NATO members is in trouble, then it's all about Article 5, which means allies can provide any form of assistance they deem necessary to respond to a situation. Now, Ukraine, isn't part of the EU, for example. So people, nations haven't gone there to directly fight side by side with them. And, Biden even said if that happens, that will be World War III, because Putin's over there. If we start sending in, it becomes World War III. So what these nations have done up until now for the last 2 years is they've just been sending money or arms to Ukraine directly. And they're saying, look, here you go, here's some guns, just use them. And Putin's saying, look, you're getting help from these guys and you shouldn't really be getting that. Why don't you join EU if you really want their help? And then we'll see what really happens. And that's what people don't really want, because they're like, well, boy, is this guy, he's posturing towards World War III. We don't know if he's serious or not. And what they're saying on the eastern side of Europe is that Putin's long-term plan is to erode the credibility of Article 5 by causing problems with them and saying, well, who's going to respond? Who's going to respond? And that's a long-term, problem. It says they also point to the fact that once the war in Ukraine ends, most likely with some sort of negotiation rather than an outright victory for Kyiv, that the army Russia has mobilized could be turned elsewhere. So this is what they're worried about in Eastern Europe. They're going, yeah, if they sign an agreement and Ukraine just give in and negotiate with Russia, then you've got the Russian army ready to work with not much to do, and that could be a problem. It says, despite Russia's military travails in Ukraine, the narrative that Article 5 is a bluff has gained widespread acceptance in Moscow. In Moscow, they're looking at it like this is a lot of rubbish. It says, after all, there are many ways in which Russia can test Article 5 without launching a full-scale conventional war. Russia's revanchist views on Baltic Sea boundaries could inspire maritime aggression. Deniable terrorist attacks and cyber attacks on critical infrastructure are plausible. A small-scale military attack on the Baltic states or Sweden's Gotland might also be considered. If America or any country were to question the doctrine of Article 5 in these instances, so if Russia starts to do any of those, and then other nations go, well, boy, is it really worth our while going in to help these? Even though we're all part of NATO, EU, the beast system, yeah, we're all against Russia, but is it really, worthwhile to our pockets to come and help you? If that starts happening, it says if America or any country were to question the doctrine of Article 5 in these instances, then it would give Russia a green light. Some leaders believe to continue its probing until it can fatally destabilize several nations. You see, that's what Russia's doing now. It's probing. You think that Russia can't just destroy Ukraine and send 2 nuclear ICBMs and flatten the whole land inside 10 minutes? They can. But they're trying to prove a point. And, even though Ukraine aren't a member of the EU, he's probing. He knows that, the EU, the NATO were bringing themselves closer to his border anyway. But now he's probing. And with what's going on, these statements that he makes to see how people are responding, that's him probing. And like they're saying, they're worried that if he then makes an agreement with Kyiv, and now he's got this army ready to roll, nothing to do, he might start probing in other areas. Once he starts to probe, he hasn't committed a full-scale war, but then he's going to say, which one of you other nations is going to come and defend your EU, NATO brothers? America, Vance, is saying, boy, America first, Europe last. So Europe last, that's these. These horns shall hate the whore. Says, unfortunately, in some European capitals, there is still denial about Russia's willingness to test NATO's Article 5. So some European capitals, they're blind. They're like, oh, no, we don't really see a problem. Is unable to see the nuisances of how it can be probed without being crossed, with memories of Trump's relatively stable first term breeding complacency. So, some European nations are blind. People are telling them, look, do you realize this is what Russia could do? They could start probing. If nobody comes to the rescue, if everybody says we don't want to get involved in your trouble, then you've given the green light to Russia to do whatever they want. And then what happens? And people are just being oblivious to it. They go, no, we can't see it. Complacency. This is aside from Europe's delusions, the lack of consensus around acceptable escalation risks with Russia is also concerning. It is not projecting strength, and without US support, these divisions could surely widen and paralyze Europe's response to a Russian challenge to Article 5. It says fundamentally, Europe is still psychologically unprepared to go it alone. These shall hate the whore. So if America want to separate themselves from Europe, and Europe are feeling vulnerable, what are Europe going to do? They're going to look for a new big brother. And who's a new big brother ready to go? It's Russia. You see, this is no different to being on the streets and you've got these gangsters, these little, you get the main guy, the drug dealer in the end, and then you've got the kids off the street. The kids come from broken homes, they got nothing. And then they go to the drug dealer's house, and the drug dealer says, "Don't worry, son, I got everything. I got a big car, big TV, and I can give you the same. But you go out and you run my drugs for me, and and I'll put my arm around you. Don't worry." You see, Putin is that drug dealer, and Europe are the street runners going, "Well, we'll run with America because we get protection. But when America start drawing themselves away from you, they're going to run to the other dealer, the other drug dealer." And Putin welcome them in with open arms, let him sit down on all the plush furniture. "You want to take a ride in my car? I can get you the same car. You just have to go and run these things for me." It says the combat readiness picture is equally bleak, within Europe. It says take Germany. Despite Chancellor Olaf Scholz's creation of €100 billion special fund to purchase modern weapons, Parliamentary Commissioner for the German Armed Forces Eva Hogel recently lamented that the Bundeswehr has too little of everything, the German army. Although Hogel wants the German army to increase its ranks from 181,000 to 203, manpower declined by 1,500 in 2023. Similar issues plague the British Armed Forces. Don't forget the Most High sending plagues to these Edomites, to these nations. If in February, the House of Commons Defence Committee was warned that the manpower and war material shortages would exhaust Britain's military capabilities after 2 months of war. You've just seen Russia go to war for 2 years. According to the professionals, the ones with the data stats, they're telling you that England, Britain, when it comes to going to war, they've got enough capabilities to last 2 months. When it comes to war of attrition, these nations don't want it. It says defense contractor North Group Grumman recently warned that Britain's air defences are very limited to the point of being negligible. So he's saying that they're so low, the resources in the air defences, don't even bother counting them when it comes to a war. And that's that's a far cry from what you think the British Empire, and they had all this power, this rulership, and look at them now. They've basically got enough weapons to defend themselves in an immediate attack, and that's about it. And that's thanks down to the people that have filtered through the democratic system. Votes have been made, budgets have been cut, people speaking up for themselves. There's your democratic system. You're trying to get everything out of your democratic system, but you can't. You want protection, you want rulership, but then you want equality. You cannot have these things. And now you're finding out. Now these other nations are finding out. It says Europe's defence industrial base is also unprepared to stand alone without America. Last month, the EU's Commissioner for the Internal Market, Thierry Breton, announced that the EU would produce 1.7 million 155mm shells in 2024. European arms industry insiders warned that the EU's actual production would likely be 1/3 of that total. These estimates are likely on the mark. It says the EU only met 30% of its March 2024 1 million shell delivery target to Ukraine, an alarming trend, as Russia produces between 2.5 to 5 million shells a year and can import countless more from Belarus and North Korea. So Russia are banging out 2.5 to 5 million shells a year. They can also borrow of Belarus and North Korea. Europe said they're going to be banging out 1.7 million a year, but at the minute they're only hitting 30% of their target. So America moving away is a big problem for Europe. Europe's going to be on the lookout for a new big brother. So it is a bleak picture indeed. As such, now it is the time to inject a vital sense of urgency into European decision making. When you make decisions, under pressure, you can make any old decision. And when Russia come knocking on the door, it's World War III. America have separated themselves. You let Trump and Vance get into power, and that's what you're going to be seeing. You're going to be seeing America pulling away from Europe, and with that, Europe are going to start to side with, if World War III then breaks out, Europe want protection. Russia will offer it and say, well, look, we'll protect you. America are going to protect you. They just separated themselves from you. And therein lies, Revelation chapter 17. These shall hate the whore and shall make her desolate. They will help Russia to destroy America and turn her into a desolate land. So it's a bleak picture indeed. As such, now it is the time to inject a vital sense of urgency into the European decision making. The continent's defence spending is slowly rising. In February, NATO's outgoing Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg declared that European alliances would collectively spend 380 billion on defence in 2024, a marked increase. Poland even plans to increase its defence budget to 5% of GDP in 2025. German Defence Minister Boris Pistorius ponders a 3.5% of GDP military outlay. The EU's European defence industry strategy is also helping governments take over civilian arms production in the event of an emergency and loosens regulations on third country arms sales. So command structure reforms such as Germany's integration of structures overseeing domestic and foreign deployment into a new central command are encouraging, as it is the appointment of a clear-headed hawks like Estonia's former Prime Minister Kaja Kallas to chief diplomat in Brussels. But given the scale of post-Cold War neglect, much more is needed to be done. They're doing things, they're trying to increase the spending, this, that and the other. But, we just read, these European nations at the moment, they're far behind. Places like America and Russia. UK can only go to war for 2 months. If you took the UK to war today, what's it now? July, August, September. By end of September, they'd be done. You could go to war with the UK today, 1-on-1, and if you've got enough resources to last 2.5 months, you'll have that place by end of September. It's yours. But what stops it at the minute is the backup from the beast system. But however, America is siding, is drawing itself away. When it's likely to see Trump in power. We can see that Vance is a America first, Europe last policy. So what's that going to do to these European nations? They're struggling with defence. World War III looks like it's going to break out, very close to. And then, what they're going to do? They're going to look for a new big brother. That big brother could be Russia. These shall hate the whore and shall make her desolate. But yes, as while Trump provided lethal arms to Ukraine and used the threat of a US withdrawal from NATO to scare European allies into increasing defence spending, his second term would be quite different. So what happened first time round? Trump said to Europe, look, America going to withdraw from NATO and you lot are buggered. And they were like, no, it's okay, Donald, don't worry, we'll spend more money. But now, Trump's coming for the second time around, and now he's got his new vice president. His second term would be quite different. It says Vance is firmly convinced that US military resources should be redirected to the Indo-Pacific region, and is more committed to a Middle East footprint than a European one. House Speaker Mike Johnson and many of his colleagues think differently, but they are unlikely to torpedo a unified Trump-Vance position. As Trump's frontrunner status hardens, Europe must become more self-reliant, not just for Ukraine's sake, but for the contingent at large. It says here, yesterday was already too late. So you start acting today. What this warning is giving you, you start acting on it today. What they're saying is yesterday. To start acting on it yesterday was already too late. We're months away from possibly seeing Donald Trump in the White House with Vance as his vice president, and is, as it says here, but unlikely to torpedo a unified Trump-Vance position. So, the Most High Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shai is cooking it up nicely. He's bringing everything to the fore. We just need a few events to, trigger the worldwide economic system into a meltdown. Could be false flag events, and war is one of them. The start of World War III will definitely create inflation. That could be the final nail in the coffin. The start of World War III on a worldwide scale could be the final nail in the coffin for the economic system. And while you've got World War III kicking off, starting, you could have the implementation of the MOTB. You've got the Battle of Armageddon in the Middle East. Troops from all around the world, all nations will be involved, including the Russian army. And then at some point you will have the destruction of America. Any nation around the world with a nuclear ICBM that possesses it, according to the scriptures, according to the word of Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shai, will be shot into America in order to destroy it, including the EU. So up until now, you've seen a great relationship between the EU and NATO and the Beast and America. Everybody's holding hands. But Daniel spoke of the 10 toes, iron mixed with clay. And so, not only are you seeing the UK, for example, in the Brexit situation, the UK broke away from the EU. That's an example of iron mixed with clay, the 10 toes that Daniel saw, or the king Nebuchadnezzar saw, that Daniel interpreted. But you're also seeing the breakup here, between Europe and America. The iron is not mixing with the clay. And so ultimately this is going to expose Europe, it's going to leave them out there looking for security, looking for a big brother, out on the street, wandering about. Little youngster, mum and dad's not at home, no money. Then comes along the top shotter, the Nino Brown, the Vladimir Putin, the street dealer. And he puts his arm around the little kid. He says, don't worry, son, I got your back. You just run these things for me, and you'll be on my team from now. And eventually, as it says, these shall hate the whore. Just going back to it. Yeah, Revelation 17 and 16. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. For the Most High have put it in their hearts to fulfill his will and to agree. Ultimately, these EU nations agreed initially to, give their kingdom unto the beast until the words of the Most High have been fulfilled. And then when America wants to separate, which you're going to see very soon, you're going to see America start to separate from EU. Then they'll have to the EU will have to make another decision. This time they will agree to fulfill the will of the Most High by saying, well, we'll have to side with another big brother, and that's going to have to be Russia. How many other big brothers are there? Your other option is Moab, and nobody wants a Moabite as a big brother, even the other nations. So I hope that was edifying. I'm going to leave it right there. Until next time, I'm going to say all praises to Yahweh, Bahashim Yahweh Shai, Bahashim Rakak Quadash. And until next time, Shalom.